All right, World History B students, Tree Hall here, and the purpose of this video is to help you write the Project 1 final essay, which is going to be due at the end of Unit 3. So I promise that if you watch this video, you will come away with a solid plan of attack, and if you're watching this video for the Unit 3 video instruction assignment, please make sure you answer those questions on the form so you can get credit for this, and not only have a plan of attack for your essay, but also get points for watching this video. A picture you see, by the way, is a couple German soldiers in the trenches in World War I. The machine gun kind of ended the old style of Napoleonic warfare, and that was the direct cause of so much death in World War I, which was the ultimate product of nationalism in the 19th century. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and go through this essay. So, moving forward. Alrighty, so we're going to begin with the essay topic. For Project 1, you will be required to write a detailed essay of 600 or more words explaining how nationalism changed the world during the 19th and early 20th centuries. In your essay, you will need to describe how nationalism influenced imperialism, upset the balance of power in Europe, and caused World War I. So that's the entire topic. One of the things that was interesting about the way that our curriculum was set up is it begins with Napoleon. And that's a great beginning because Napoleon really starts the ball rolling as far as what ends up happening with nationalism. He was a middle-class ruler who made it very good, and he defeated every army that they sent against him for 20 years until they finally, after time and time again of fighting France, they finally wore France down and defeated Napoleon and put kings back on the throne. But that was the effect that he had of people fighting under a unified France where the people own their own country and they're fighting under the ruler. That changed Europe forever, and it really started this period of nationalism that would ultimately, it would basically cause imperialism. It would upset the balance of power in Europe. It would change the political map in Europe, and it also ultimately is going to cause World War I. So nationalism is kind of a double-edged blade. There's some good sides to it, but there's definitely some negative sides to nationalism, and that's what you're going to be writing about in this essay. So anyway, let's move on. Let's move to the next part of this. Okay, before we move any further, this is important. You will need your Project 1 fact list for this essay. So if you're watching this video from our curriculum, then this particular PowerPoint is attached, and you can open this and you can get to the link and it will take you to Google Classroom, or you can just go to Google Classroom because that's just something you can do. If you type Google Classroom onto Google and you're logged into your school email, it's going to take you there. You want to open that up. When you did the Project 1 fact list, basically what you were doing is you were finding the facts for your body paragraphs, and you were even writing the analysis, and all the stuff that you have in there you can use in your essay. So don't just let that go to waste. Jump in there and open that up. So just take a moment, press pause, go into Google Classroom, open up your Project 1 fact list, and just have that open up in a tab. That should be on a Google Sheet. So once you've done that, go ahead and unpause this and let's move forward. Alrighty, so the first step into doing an essay is to turn the topic into a question with a question mark. Sometimes your topic is written out that way, sometimes it's not. So on this particular essay, it talks about it says, write a detailed essay of 600 or more words explaining how nationalism changed the world during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Notice there's no question mark there. So what you have to do when you see a topic like this is you have to turn this into a question with a question mark. And it's pretty simple, and usually it's shorter. And so if you look here, you can see the question that's being asked is, how did nationalism change the world during the 19th and early 20th centuries? Now, why is it important to put a question with a question mark on here? Well, two reasons. For one, it clarifies what you're going to be writing about. This is an essay about nationalism. So you can underline that term, nationalism. That's important. That's what you're going to be talking about in this essay. And furthermore, you're going to be talking about how it changed the world. What effect, or another way to look at this, what effect do you see of nationalism during the 19th and early 20th centuries, because it had a very powerful effect as it came out, especially the nationalism that you see that came out of Europe, because it created the new imperialism. It created all these unification movements and destabilization movements. Also, by the way, created the modern map of Europe that we see today, and ultimately it causes World War I. So there's a pretty big effect. Now, the second reason it's important to turn this into a question with a question mark. Your thesis statement, which comes at the end of the intro paragraph and is the single most important sentence in your entire essay, needs to, answer this question. Now, if someone asked you the question, how did nationalism change the world during the 19th and early 20th centuries, and you answered, donkeys live a long time, no one's ever seen a dead donkey. That doesn't make any sense because it has nothing to do with the question. Now, why do I even mention this? Looking at that question, you need to make sure when you go to write this essay that at the bottom of your intro paragraph, you have an answer that if you put it right next to that question, it makes perfect sense. Now, by the way, this is not super hard. The most important thing you need to do, that you need to remember when you do your thesis statement, is to repeat some of the words of the question. So your thesis statement needs to have some words like nationalism changed the world during the 19th and early 20th centuries by, and for this particular essay, it might be simplest just to mention your three body paragraphs: by causing imperialism, by destabilizing the balance of power in Europe, and ultimately causing World War I. Perfect answer to that question. So that's why we turn the topic into a question with a question mark. Got it? Let's move on. Okay. Once you've turned the topic into a question with a question mark, you need to organize your essay. Now, over on the left, you can see, once again, we have the topic. So you've got, whoa, didn't mean to do that. So you've got the topic in your essay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now, anytime you write an essay, it's a stylized piece of writing, which means that you have to follow the rules. Like if you're writing a haiku, you need to first line has to have 5 syllables, second line has 7, third line has 5 syllables again. In an essay, all essays are made up of 3 parts. Intro, where you tell the reader what you're going to tell them. Body, where you tell them. And conclusion, where you tell them what you told them. Now, within any essay, the body is 50 to 75% of the overall words of the essay. Why is that? Because that's where you put the facts. That's where you tell them. Typically, when you write an essay in high school, you do a 5-paragraph essay. Now, what's nice about that, the intro and conclusion are almost always the same size, because intro, you tell them what you're going to tell them. Conclusion, you tell them what you told them. When you go to write the conclusion, you're going to look up at the intro, and you're going to basically kind of restate that. Now, what is good about that is you always know when you write a 5-paragraph essay what 2 paragraphs are going to be. One is going to be the intro, one is going to be the conclusion. Now, if that's the case, then all you have to figure out is what the 3 body paragraphs are going to be. Now, what is interesting with this essay topic, or maybe not interesting, maybe it was just written that way to make it easy for you, is do you notice that you have to do 3 things? 1, you have to describe how nationalism influenced imperialism. 2, how it upset the balance of power in Europe. And 3, how it caused World War I. You also need 3 body paragraphs. Do you see any pattern of organization here? Now, over on the right is what I call an essay map. This is one of those things that if you take just a few minutes to do this, this will cut the amount of time that it takes to write your essay in half. You know that you need an intro paragraph. You know your first body paragraph is going to be about imperialism. Your second is going to be about political changes or balance of power, however you want to phrase that. And your third is going to be about World War I. Then you're going to have a conclusion. The reason this really cuts down your time on writing an essay is because it's easy to write a paragraph. It's harder to write a bigger essay. But if you organize that bigger essay beforehand, you're going to find that it's so much easier to do this. Anything about imperialism belongs in the first paragraph. Anything about the political changes you see in Europe at the end of the 19th century or upsetting the balance of power goes into the second body paragraph. Anything about World War I goes into the third. Now again, remember how I told you to open up your fact list? Look at the fact list. You're going to see that it's organized the same way. Perfect. This is going to make writing this easy. Let's move on to our next slide. Now, once you come up with the organization, The next thing that you need to do is you need to think about what needs to happen in those paragraphs. Now, your intro paragraph has to do two things. First, it needs to introduce readers to your topic. In this case, nationalism as it was seen between Napoleon and the end of World War I. So you know a great place to begin? Define nationalism. You want to do it really dramatically and do it even cooler? Start with Napoleon. Go from Napoleon to nationalism to your thesis statement, where ultimately you talk about the effects of nationalism. So you can look up nationalism, and it's in. I made a video on nationalism, and I talk about that in that slideshow. And there's a definition there. You can go to Google and look up the definition of nationalism. But you know what's even better? Look in the lessons. It talks about this, and it talks about Napoleon. Again, he loomed large in history, and he ultimately caused this. In one of the slideshows I built on this, I had like a ghost of Napoleon on the World War I battlefield because he was kind of there in his way. He had got this ball rolling. So once you define nationalism, and you introduce it to your readers as it was seen between Napoleon and the end of World War I, then you transition down to how did nationalism change the world. And again, for this particular essay, you can just write out your nationalism changed the world by causing imperialism, comma, upsetting the balance of power, comma, and ultimately causing World War I. And so there you are. You've got this, and you look at that paragraph and you say, does that make sense? Did I do a nice transition from Napoleon all the way through World War I? Then, of course, you go to write the body paragraphs, but then when you finally get to the end, you go back to that intro, and your conclusion needs to do two things: remind the readers about the topic and restate the thesis statement. Another way to look at nationalism in the 19th century, Europe really got a big head. You know, they were the first industrialized area, and they just, their brains kind of inflated, their heads inflated, and they really thought that Europeans were better than everybody else and all this. And it bit them in the butt when they got to World War I, because they finally got to a place where they decided to fight each other, and boy, that fight was more than anybody expected. And when it was all done, Winston Churchill once said there was virtually no difference between winners and losers at the end of World War I. I think he was right, except afterwards, the peace that was declared was a horrible peace, and it carved up. There were definitely losers at the Treaty of Versailles. But as far as casualties on the battlefield, the cost of World War I, it bankrupted everybody. It was really awful. And so basically, that's the ultimate conclusion of nationalism, that the heads popped, and the aftermath was pretty bad. Okay, now let's talk about your body paragraphs. Remember, your entire essay is how did nationalism change the world during the 19th and early 20th century. Each body paragraph must address the topic question in a specific way. When you go to write these body paragraphs, one way to look at this is this. Your body paragraph is a 7 to 8 sentence answer for these questions that you see here. So, for example, in body paragraph 1, or main point 1, how did nationalism cause imperialism during the 19th and early 20th centuries? You're going to answer that in 6 to 8 sentences. And you're going to have a paragraph that answers that question. Sometimes that makes it easier to write that. Can you write that? Well, yeah, that's pretty easy. You know, there's a lot of good links in there that talks about the relationship between nationalism, imperialism, and when you look at your fact list, you had to take every single development there and tie it to nationalism. So it's not super hard. When you get to the second body paragraph, again, you have a 6 to 8 sentence answer to this question. How did nationalism upset the balance of power in Europe? The first thing that should come to mind is unification of Italy and Germany, but there were other things going on too, like the Slavic nationalism and just competition in general. And then last, main point 3, how did nationalism cause or contribute to World War I? So again, each of your body paragraphs is a 1-paragraph answer. You must use examples from the lessons in units 1 to 2 in your answers. And again, look at your fact list. Let's move forward. So I'm not going to leave you stranded. If you want even more detail, take a look at this. Main point 1, how did nationalism cause imperialism? Now, a couple things you need to know. In every body paragraph, it must do 2 things. 1, it must provide information. And 2, it must provide analysis. Information comes from Wikipedia. Analysis comes from your brain. So, first of all, use your fact list, pull that up, take a look at what you wrote about imperialism in your fact list. Does it still look good? Does it look good enough to put in the essay? If it does, the stuff that you put in the description goes into the first part of the body paragraph about information. And then you need to ask yourself, did I explain the link between imperialism and nationalism in the right-hand side of that fact list? And did I do it adequately? So what you want to put after those facts is you want to explain how nationalism caused those things. If you talk about the scramble for Africa, in the first couple, 3 sentences there, you're going to talk about that scramble. You're going to give me the who, what, where, and when, dates, the whole deal. But then you also need to say this was caused by nationalism because all the countries in Europe were trying to expand their economies because they were in economic competition with each other because they were all trying to be the best. And Africa just happened to be like low-hanging fruit. You know, that they did Africa because they could, and it was close, and it made sense. So as far as the analysis goes, there's not any right or wrong. There's just logical or illogical. When you get into the upset, the balance of power, or the political changes, again, remember to use your fact list. Now, on that particular item, I had you on the fact list look up the Congress of Vienna, or the Concert of Europe, and the balance of power. Balance of power means everyone's equal power. Concert of Europe was a political body that they actually set up. It was a little bit of an alliance system that it basically enforced the balance of power to make sure that there was no war. Because after 20 years of fighting Napoleon's wars, people were wore out. They had lost too many men. But then nationalism steps in. It kind of breaks this system down. So what you need to ask yourself as you're looking at these facts, how did these things break down that system, that balance of power that kept the peace in Europe for over 50 years? Now again, in this body paragraph, same thing. You need to describe the 2 or 3 items you chose to write about in good detail. You can see that list over there. There's a bigger list with links on your fact list, who, what, where, and when. And then you need to explain the relationship to nationalism. How were these things changed or caused by nationalism? Also, here's the other one too, because again, this is an essay about how these things change, how nationalism changed the world. How did the political changes of this era change the world? You know, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is, sure, it might have broken down the balance of power, but you know what's kind of funny? When you look at the map of Europe today, it looks like the map that was produced by about 1880. So, you know, by 1880, no more medieval Europe, no more even remnant of medieval Europe. It's modern. So, and that was probably a good thing. Okay, and last, main paragraph, or main point 3, body paragraph 3, how did nationalism cause or contribute to World War I? Best way to do this is describe the lead up to war, because that's where the nationalism comes. And you see, you know, like when you talk about Austria-Hungary meddling with Serbia, or when you talk about the alliance system, the Triple Alliance or the Triple Entente, or militarism. You know, one of the things that I have you look at in the nationalism video is the balance, the relative strength of the combatants in World War I. And what's funny about this is, on the eve of World War I, the only country that had a smaller military than the U.S. was Greece, and it had 5 million people. And you had countries that had 1/10 of our population that had a military that was, you know, 2 or 3 million men, because everybody could sense that something was going wrong. And so you've got that, how did nationalism cause or contribute? Again, provide that information and then link it to nationalism. Link that information to nationalism, and then you've got it. Okay, moving along. I think we are just about done. All right, you are ready to write this essay. Please don't forget that this is an essay about nationalism, and the stuff that you're talking about, you have to relate everything back to nationalism. Here's your essay map. Stay within its bonds, and if you need any more one-on-one help, I'm happy to provide that for you. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope that you have a solid plan of attack for your essay, and that after watching this, say, yeah, I think I can do this. And if you need more help, let me know.